Eckhart saw hell, too. You know what he said? He said the only thing that burns in hell is the part of you that won't let go of your life. Your memories, your attachments, they burn them all away. But they're not punishing you, he said. They're freeing your soul. So the way he sees it, if you're frightened of dying and you're holding on, you'll see devils tearing your life away. But if you've made your peace, then the devils are really angels, freeing you from the earth. It's just a matter of how you look at it, that's all. So don't worry, okay? Okay?
Happy heresies, and welcome to the desert of the real. Welcome to the machine, my son, and the means to escape it. Welcome with kindness and love to Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio, broadcast from the virtual Alexandria, that state of mind where East meets West, through the God above God.com. This is your incessant exploration of the world's most influential yet least known heretics, the Gnostics, as well as their brethren in the esoterica and Dionysian freethinkers. We shy away from scholarly pontification and definitely avoid New Age verbal hemorrhoids.
You are not in Kansas anymore. If there is a hell, you might want to go there for some R&R.
We don't take prisoners but liberate them. We are not the final authority on anything, but hope to be an endless possibility for everything. Culminating with you finding the mystery that works for you and only you. Uncovering any holy or unholy information that liberates you from cosmic and personal oppression. From the powers and principalities that rule so many fools' heavens around you. We are here for your peril and glorification. We ride with those searching for the truth and avoid those who have found it.
You always got to follow the truth, even if it brings the whole damn thing crashing down around you.
Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio is not so much about answers, but insights. Too many institutions and their gods out there are full of answers. Answers for everything. Answers on how to live your life and tell those around you how to live their lives. So many answers. Those prisons built with stones of law. Those brothels with bricks of religion, as William Blake said.
Are you a clergyman or just a PR man? When you come right down to it, Mr. Carter, is there any difference?
If you want certain answers, instructions to reach a paradise constructed by the fantasies of average sensibilities, Aeon Byte might not be for you. Instead, better rely on fridge magnet spirituality, Tony Robbins' lukewarm mentality heading into the slaughterhouses of comfort. Or that truth in numbers fallacy. Play it safe and play right in the hands of Jehovah and his angelic mafia, right into the Disney land of mere being.
I want to become a guru so girls will like me. Then I will like myself.
After all, Krishnamurti said truth is a pathless land, and I say Gnosis is that pathless labyrinth. An adventure aeons in the making to reach the aeons that bite back at fundamentalism, literalism, and intolerance. Through the image of the profane and into the tangibility of the sacred. Science guides us, art inspires us, and our dreams light the way, all fueled by the inner flame of our untamed love for the downtrodden, the meek, and those who give from their poverty, as Jesus refers to the saved in the New Testament.
I know we're all pretty small in the big scheme of things, and I suppose the most you can hope for is to make some kind of difference. But what kind of difference have I made? What in the world is better because of me?
As Osho once said, creativity is the greatest rebellion against existence, especially against the archons and their henchmen in the establishment and the elite, who created deficient systems and cast us into them to devour our divine spark like a vampire on a tampon.
Ha, ha, ooh, hee, ha, ha. And I thought my jokes were bad.
Or if my balderdash is too flowery and Byzantine, and just makes as little sense as a plot for Prometheus, let us instead take the wisdom of Robert Ingersoll, who famously said, "My creed is this: happiness is the only good. The place to be happy is here. The time to be happy is now. The way to be happy is to make others so." Or the wisdom of Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas, who, after the apostles ask him how to be truly righteous, he simply answers, "Don't lie, and don't do what you hate, because all things are disclosed before heaven. After all, there is nothing hidden that will not be revealed, and there is nothing covered up that will remain undisclosed." In other words, be authentic, be real, be honest, know yourself, or simply write your own gospel and live your own myth. Inshallah, my beloved truth seekers, inshallah.
Hell, I'm going to grant your greatest wish. I'm going to show you a world without sin.
I am Abraxas, and his mortal incarnation of Miguel Connor, broadcasting from the lawful and frigid dystopia of Chicago, patiently waiting for the beginning of the world. And you are Abraxas too, terrible gods above the gods of this world. I am a recovering addict, sci-fi hack, and jack of all offs, at your service, and in the service of Sophia, Noria, Mary Magdalene, Hypatia of Alexandria, and all the manifestations of the forgotten divine feminine. I am your Pompidus of Gnosis, that smell of Satori Colitas rising up through the air.
You created me. I didn't create some loser alter ego to make myself feel better. Have I ever let us down? How far have you come because of me?
On this approximately April 20th, the year of our Demiurge 2013, we have the honor and pleasure of being joined by Robert Sullivan to discuss his new book, The Royal Arch of Enoch. Time to get deeper into the vaginas of the great orgasm that is Freemasonry and the secret society romance. You see, my beloved truth seekers, the influence of Freemasonry on modern society is far greater than commonly believed, just as its reach into the arcane past is far wider than ever imagined. The Freemason legacy continues to inform the American soul long after it helped create the USA and give shape to the spiritual architecture of much of Western culture. Its mystic tools go beyond Renaissance and Enlightenment esotericism, drawing directly from the ancient wisdom of the Gnostics, Pythagoras, the Book of Enoch, Astrotheology, and much more. We will understand in our interview the true scope of Freemason lore, including its eternal plan for a new solar age.
A new age has begun. An age of freedom!
This day, we rescue a world from mysticism and tyranny.
I certainly enjoyed Robert's book. Beyond the august and often incendiary history of Freemasonry, well researched and presented by Robert, it has something for every iconoclast out there, including comparative religion, mythology, solar religions, sacred symbolism and geometry, and a dearth of conspiracy theories. Check it out, and check out of mundane reality for a spell or two. You can find more information on Robert at robertwsullivanib.wordpress.com. That is Robert W. Sullivan with 2 L's, IV.press.can.
You know, the Templars and the Freemasons believed that the treasure was too great for any one man to have, not even a king. That's why they went to such lengths to keep it hidden.
That's right. The Founding Fathers believed the same thing about government. I figure their solution will work for the treasure, too.
Give it to the people.
And certainly check out our archive of past shows for mind-expanding, reality-dispanding episodes on the Freemasons and other secret societies, like Aeon Byte number 94 with Robert Lomas, or Aeon Byte number 164 with Jay Kinney, both high-ranking Freemason members with different but lucid views on Freemasonry. This episode, and pretty much all shows, will be stationed on iTunes and YouTube in their entirety, which means they are free to download or access. You can still get older episodes at our archive of past shows, though. Over 250 of them. Easily the greatest resource center for Gnosticism, the esoterica, free thought, and ancient religion on the internets. This means I now basically rely on your contributions to keep this venture going. So please support Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio.
What am I doing here? Why did I bother to come here today? Nobody even seems to know my name. I've been on this planet for 40 years, and I'm no closer to understanding a single thing. Why am I here? How did I get here?
Every time you give shekels to the mass media ruled by the Demogorgon, the name Voltaire gave to the demiurge, instead of alternative avenues like Aeon Byte, you make baby Gnostic Jesus cry. In fact, beyond Aeon Byte, don't forget the other inception agents on the bad dream that is the internet, such as Gnostic Warrior, Gnostic Media, A Cult of Personality, Expanding the Mind, H2O Network, and many others. Without them, we will continue to be the frogs in the boiling waters of a creation gone mad. Time to lose our minds and come to our senses.
You cannot play God, then wash your hands of the things that you've created. Sooner or later, the day comes and you can't hide from the things that you've done anymore.
I am also looking for extra work as a writer, blogger, journalist, copywriter, or really anything. If anyone has any leads or advice, please let me know. Thank you, Eva units, who support this Hobbit podcast on a weekly basis. But enough of my drivel. On to the interview with Robert Sullivan on his intriguing and compelling book, The Royal Arch of Enoch.
Who controls the British crown? Who keeps the metric system down? We do. We do. Who gets Atlantis off the maps? Who keeps the Martians under wraps? We do. We do. Who holds back the electric car? Who makes Steve Gutenberg a star? Fish of their sight, who rigs every Oscar night? We do. We do.
This is the Aeon Byte interview, and with us we have the pleasure of being joined by Robert W. Sullivan to discuss his book, The Royal Arch of Enoch, The Impact of Masonic Ritual, Philosophy, and Symbolism. How are you doing today, Robert?
I am very well. Thank you, Miguel, and thank you for having me on your show.
The pleasure is all ours. So tell us a little bit about yourself, specifically your journey to writing The Royal Arch of Enoch.
Oh, it'd be my pleasure. This book started for me 20 years ago. I didn't start writing it 20 years ago, but the journey for me started 20 years ago when I was an associate student at Oxford University. I was at St. Catherine's College. My alma mater was Gettysburg College in Pennsylvania, and I was accepted to become an associate student at St. Cat's for the year at Oxford. When I got over there, this would have been in September of 1992, and I was there till around June of 1993. I was studying history, philosophy. I was reading a lot of the books that a lot of my teachers at Gettysburg were relying on. And what became apparent to me when I was over there, and this was 1992, I was only 20, 21 years old at the time. I wasn't a Mason or anything like that. But what really sort of got me interested in this subject matter was the concept of the Hermetic tradition, if you will, coming out of the Renaissance into the Enlightenment, ultimately being carried on in secret societies such as Freemasonry, Odd Fellows, in the United States. And it was really the impact of this tradition on material culture, both politically, socially, and even economically, and even religiously. And I just became very fascinated with this. I was introduced when I was over there to people, authors that I had never heard of over here. Mainly the main one was Frances Yates. She was a English author who wrote extensively about, in the influence of like Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry, the writings of people like Giordano Bruno, the Jesuit priest Athanasius Kircher, and I just really became impressed with this. And it started this sort of ball rolling where I just started researching more and more about Freemasonry and about how the values contained within Freemasonry, both Blue Lodge and ultimately the higher degrees, which is what my book's about, just how they impacted society and and history. And it was sort of almost like it wasn't anything negative, but it was almost like the major, quote unquote, mainstream historians were sort of like stepping away from this material. It was one thing that Yates just drove her nuts. That one of the reasons that motivated her in her writing her books were that the mainstream historians were kind of ignoring or sidestepping this material. And ultimately, when I came back to the States, I graduated Gettysburg. I went to law school in the late 1990s, and again, it was, it wasn't like I started really, I was doing the research, but it wasn't, I had a life to live too. I got introduced to the teachings, the books of people like Albert Pike, Manly Palmer Hall, Albert Mackey, and as I was going to law school, the opportunity presented itself for me to join a Masonic lodge here in Baltimore. I took the opportunity. I became a Freemason, a third-degree Freemason, in Amicable John's Lodge number 25. That's here in Baltimore. I went to law school. Shortly before graduating law school, I actually became a 32nd degree here in the Valley of Baltimore, Grand Orient of Maryland. And it really was in the late 90s and the early 2000s with the advent of the Internet that when I got on the Internet, I didn't have a page or anything, but I began to find people who were interested in the same subject matter. And I remember thinking to myself one day, gee, wouldn't this be great if one day I could have one of these web pages and start presenting the research that I was doing on this and, get interaction from people. And it wasn't until the mid-2000s, probably around 2005, 2006, and, bear in mind, this is before Twitter, Facebook. It was with the social networking page called MySpace. I created one of these pages, and I basically turned it into this Masonic research page, if you will. I was posting photo galleries relating to this research, relating to sort of the astrological, mystical elements of Freemasonry. Obviously, I was a Mason by that time. I was well versed with people like Hall, Pike, Mackey, and I posted photo galleries on this. It was completely open to the public. I began posting blogs about it. I began talking about the symbolism of Masonic, iconography in popular movies, and this the page just went absolutely skyrocket. I was getting hits from it, all over the place. And it wasn't until around 2005, 2006, right around the same time, a friend of mine approached me who was also a Mason, and he had seen the page and said, Rob, what you're doing here with this page is really great, and I commend you for it. He said, but rather than kind of fooling around with this, why don't you commit yourself to a book about it? And that was something I had originally planned anyway, going all the way back to my Oxford days. And sort of, like you see in a cartoon, the light bulb went off over my head. And probably starting around, late 2006, I really began putting pen to paper. And it wasn't until 2008, 2009 when I really began, writing on this thing nonstop and just committing myself to doing, the research and just staying up, sitting at my computer 14 hours at a time doing this book. and it ultimately was completed in the summer of 2011. I copyrighted it in August of 2011, and the book was published as it is today a year later.
So, Robert, tell us about the Book of Enoch, which you write extensively about, and it may surprise people that Enoch is very influential to Freemasonry. Why is that?
Yes, you are correct. The Book of Enoch, it ties into Masonic lore. The Royal Arch degree, there's one of them that's actually named after Enoch. And to understand this, you have to understand a little bit about Enoch, who he is, what he represents, and his own book. Enoch appears in the book of Genesis at 524, and he's one of two people in the Bible to never die a physical death. The prophet Elijah is the other. And Enoch is taken up into heaven, and in corporeal form. Basically, he doesn't enter as a spirit, he enters as a human being. And when he gets into heaven, he sees some pretty strange things. Maybe not strange, but some things that are out of the norm when you deal with Orthodox Christianity. He gets up there. He basically is told that the tree of life that Adam and Eve bit from is the Hebrew Kabbalah. The apple that Eve bit from is symbolically one of the Sephirot of Hebrew Kabbalah. He's introduced to a group of angels known as the Watchers, who are looking over this another group of angels called the fallen. Basically, they're a group of fallen angels that have been cast out, and the Watchers keep an eye on them. Sometimes the cast out angels are actually called the Watchers also. And what he learns is he kind of when he's in heaven, and he actually he serves as sort of like an intermediary. The word lawyer is not a good word, but he serves as an intermediary between these fallen angels, God, and these archangels. And this is documented in his book called the Book of Enoch. It dates from around 300 BCE. And in it, Enoch is describing what he sees in heaven, basically. The book is lost from history from around 2 Common Era to around the late 1700s, when a Freemason named James Bruce is traveling Ethiopia, and he comes across some copies of it, and he returns to Europe with them. The copies are deposited in the basement of the Bodleian Library at Oxford University. They sit there till 1821, when they're finally translated into English. Now, what my book documents is that the high degrees of Freemasonry, which are coming out of France in the 1730s, and this one degree in particular called the Royal Arch of Enoch, is actually documenting elements of the Book of Enoch, which should not be happening because the book should have been off the history pages. I propose in my book that someone in Europe must have seen a copy of this thing, or there was a copy in Europe floating around prior to Bruce coming back with it. The most likely candidate would have been a guy named Andrew Michael the Chevalier Ramsay. But why it's important within Freemasonry is it is within this degree, and this is reflective of the Book of Enoch. It's where it's where the candidate, it's the recovery of what's called the Tetragrammaton, which is the name of God, and it's through this recovery of this that all restoration of pre-flood of Noah knowledge is restored to mankind. And I should point out what I'm saying is, and this gets into Masonic lore, and you kind of asked me why is this important. Within Masonic lore, when Enoch returns to Earth with this knowledge that he's gleaned from being in heaven, he catches wind that the flood of Noah is coming and that mankind's going to be eradicated. What he does is he takes this knowledge, inscribes it on 2 pillars, one containing the 7 liberal arts, one containing mathematical knowledge, and the name of God, the Tetragrammaton, buries it in this underground vault. The flood of Noah comes, the vault survives, and it's in with Masonic lore that it's the Masons, through these 2 people named Pythagoras and Hermes Trismegistus, that discover this vault, restore the knowledge to mankind, and in Masonic ritual, the Masons actually discover this vault themselves during the building of the Second Temple. And it ties into the high degree and this mythology of Masonry as the keepers of this lost yet legitimate knowledge.
And doesn't the name Enoch in Hebrew mean initiated? Isn't that symbolically something important?
That's correct. The name Enoch in Hebrew means the initiated, and what that derives from is his learning this, again, it reflects to a Masonic candidate being a member of the initiated. And what it does is it reflects that the supreme, esoteric knowledge that Enoch got while being in heaven, seeing all these things, which God ultimately tried to eradicate with the flood of Noah. This ties into sort of the anti-Masonry element, that the Masons are the preservers of this wisdom, this knowledge that God was trying to eradicate, and through the possession of this loss of God and the ability to restore this lost knowledge, this is the crux, if you will, of anti-Masonry of the 1820s that almost wipes Freemasonry out in the United States.
And beyond Enoch, why are solar deities and symbolism, which are replete in your book, so relevant to Freemasonry?
It ties into Enoch. Enoch, if you read Genesis, when you get into concepts of these solar deities, it's reflected. The solar symbology is replete in Freemasonry. Enoch in the Book of Genesis lived for 365 years. That's an obvious solar reference. In the Royal Arch degree, the recovery of the Tetragrammaton is made possible through the sun rays penetrating this underground arch, or this underground vault. Within Blue Lodge Freemasonry, the actual third degree ritual is basically a retelling of the Osirian cycle from Egypt, where Osiris is killed, Isis, his wife, possesses the secret name of God, produces magic to resurrect Osiris, and the magic she produces is by holding the secret name of an Egyptian sun god named Amun-Re or Ra. This is symbolically duplicated, if you will, in Blue Lodge Freemasonry, where in the third degree the candidate portrays Hiram Abiff, who is a solar icon or stand-in, if you will. He is killed, and he's ultimately searched and found. His body is found by 12 fellowcrafts. The 12 fellowcrafts are, of course, the 12 houses of the zodiac, who are looking for their lost solar ruler, if you will. Hiram Abiff is resurrected on the third try. They try to resurrect him first by the grip of by the grip of an entered apprentice. That doesn't work. Then they try fellowcraft. That doesn't work. Then they try the grip of a master mason, which is also known as the grip of a lion's paw. That works and resurrects him. When Hiram Abiff's body is buried, it is concealed with something called a sprig of acacia. That is a flower sacred to the sun god Apollo. The resurrection of Hiram Abiff by the strong grip of the lion's paw is a reference to the sign of Leo, which is the soul house of the sun. The concept of the dying and resurrected sun god is replete in mythology, comparative religion, and of course, when we get into controversial subject matter about this, I don't really mind talking about it, but it's one of the I'll certainly talk about it with you, but it's one of the subject matters that gets me into trouble over on Facebook, and it's one of the subject matters that I've received what you would want to call some of the more mean-spirited emails about, where you get into Christianity. The concept of the dying and resurrected sun god, which is, Jesus. It's,
of course.
Yeah, being dead for 3 days and coming out of the tomb, at the vernal equinox. The crucifixion, which is a solar, astrological allegory. We just talked about, the 12 fellowcraft looking for the lost sun god. This is parodied, or not parodied. This is, comparatively brought to light with the 12 apostles who assist Christ the Son on his annual journey. This is in Judaism with the 12 tribes of Israel, who, are the 12 houses of the zodiac. This is allegory. And this is, reflected in this third degree ritual and carried forward in this Royal Arch ritual. This concept of the resurrected sun, the sun bringing light to the world, the sun penetrating this lost vault, bringing forth the Tetragrammaton, which allows the restoration of this somewhat forbidden yet lost legitimate knowledge.
Well, we'll certainly get back to what the more orthodox minds are saying about Freemasonry, but in the Royal Arch of Enoch, you suggest we might be entering a new solar age. What is a solar age, and what is the relevance of it?
This is, again, somewhat reflective of Freemasonry. Because again, when you're getting into this third degree with the 12 houses, what we're really talking about here is, again, this concept of the sun god. And when I say the sun god, that's with a U, not an O. And what we're dealing with when we talk about solar ages, we're dealing with what's called the Platonic year. This is an astronomical event called the precession of the equinoxes. It's a little hard, if someone is coming to this material for the first time, it's a little hard to understand, but I'm going to do my best to try to explain it. Basically, the way it works is the sun, our sun, is in one house of the zodiac for approximately 2,000 years. For the last 2,000 years, the sun has been in the house of Pisces, what's called the Piscean age. 2,000 years before that, we were in the house of Aries the ram, and 2,000 years before that, we were in the house of Taurus the bull. We are now 2,000 years into Pisces, and we are currently leaving it, heading into the next house, which is Aquarius. The reason we know that the sun remains in this one house for 2,000 years is because on the vernal equinox, which is around approximately March 21st of every year, the sun rises behind this particular sign. And with the precessional cycle, the sun moves backwards each degree, moves backwards through these houses of the zodiac 1 degree every 72 years. So it takes about 2,000 years for the sun to recycle itself in one particular house and go into another house. This is a phenomenon caused by the gravitational pull on our sun, most likely by a planet or one of the stars in the Pleiades. Some suggest by the star Spica in the constellation Virgo. That this is debatable. But what the Royal Arch delves into is that the solar symbology, the sort of adoration of the sun these 2,000 years reflects a new religious tradition that emerges. For example, let's go back 4,000 years when we're in the age of Taurus the bull. What do you have? You have bull worship. You have the Apis bull worship in Egypt. You have myths about minotaurs and mazes. The maze is a solar emblem. The minotaur has the bull head. This is, the adoration of the sun in the house of Taurus. Then we go into the house of Aries. Aries is a fire sign. We keep a concept of Abraham with the ram in the thorn bush. There are numerous fire elements contained within the Hebrew religion. Mithraism has fire adoration. Zoroastrianism
Mithras
has fire.
kills the bull.
Mithras slays the bull heading into the new age of Aries. That's absolutely right. Then we get into 2,000 years ago. Well, now we're exiting the fire sign of Aries and entering Pisces. Well, what do we have? We got the Piscean fisherman Jesus, the Son of God, who walks on water. Well, Pisces is a water sign. Who washes people's feet? Well, Pisces, is the ruler of the feet. Jesus was born of the Virgin. That's the opposite house of Pisces. We've got, is the fisher of men who feeds his followers with 2 fishes. This is all the, emblems of the Piscean sun adoration. Now, 2,000 years later, here it is 2012, or 2013, leaving 2012, and now the sun is exiting Pisces. It has been for some time. The sun just doesn't jump around from one house to the other. But slowly and slowly, we're exiting Pisces and we're entering into Aquarius, the next house up. What does that mean? The deacons of Aquarius are equality, freedom, brotherhood. It's basically the doctrines of Freemasonry, the concepts of universal brotherhood. That's the symbolism that's so important to me, and which I talk about in the Royal Arch book.
Tell us about Thomas Campanella and the City of the Sun.
What you have happening syncretically with the house of Aquarius becoming exalted and exiting the house of Pisces, we of course have the birth of the United States, which is what I suggest in my book is why, well, I don't suggest it, I state it, which is a Masonic republic. And of course, if you're going to have a Masonic republic, you're going to have a capital city that is replete with solar iconography. And again, remember, let's just go back to the basics. Let's just step back for a minute. You go into Blue Lodge Freemasonry. The worshipful master sits in the east, representing the sun. This is what brings life to the world. The life and light in the world is the sun. Who sheds wisdom upon his knowledge. Or enlightenment. So what you have in this country is you have the federal district, which is, of course, our capital, Washington, D.C., and you have numerous solar iconography in that city. I say in the book that probably the most utopian reference for the federal district is a novella. It's a utopian novella written by a Dominican friar. It's called The City of the Sun. The guy who wrote it is named Tommaso Campanella, and the full title of this work is The City of the Sun: A Conversation Between a Genoese Sea Master or Sea Captain and then Master of the Knights Hospitalier. It's published around 1613, 1614, and in it describes that this captain has come back from the New World. What's that? And when he's there, he's seen this capital city, this new city of the sun. And the Grand Master says to him, "Well, talk to me about it. Well, what did you see?" And one of the first things he says out of his mouth is, he says, "Well, the capital city has a giant building that sits on a hill with a dome on it." And again, this is reflective of our capital. People like Latrobe and Mills and L'Enfant, people who helped plan this federal district, would have clearly, and Daniel Carroll as well, would have clearly have been aware of this utopian work. And the symbolism of the dome on a building, and again, I'm excluding commercial buildings or a shopping center or something like that. That comes out of the works of a Roman architect named Vitruvius, who lived around the turn of the last age over. He was there in the early 100s, Common Era, basically. And he's a city planner, he's an architect, and Vitruvius writes a book, I believe it's called 10 Books of Architecture, maybe 4 books. But anyway, his work is reinterpreted by these 2 Renaissance masters, the main one being Andre Palladio. And they say that basically if you're going to put a dome on a building, it's basically turning it into a chamber of the sun god Apollo. And you'll see this, it has 3 really symbolic importances. Number one is if you're going to put it on a government building like our U.S. Capitol, what it's designating it as basically a chamber of the sun meaning like New Age democracy or New Age enlightenment. If you put it on a library like you have in the Bodleian, it's basically a chamber of light meaning enlightenment. And then if you want to put it on an actual religious structure like in the Vatican, St. Peter's Basilica, or the Baltimore Basilica here in downtown where I'm at right now, you're actually doing legitimately of a chamber of sun worship where basically the sun god Apollo or Mithras, or Horus is being adored under the name of Jesus, basically. And that's the symbology of the dome on a building, as it were. The Masons who are planning the federal district, you have the Capitol building. I'd say in the book that it's probably the most salient utopic reference for the federal district. There are other solar icons in the federal district. The most notably, with the exception of the United States Capitol building, would be the Washington Monument, which is, of course, an obelisk. Then we're dealing with symbolism relating to the sun god of Egypt, Amun-Re, or Horus, or even Osiris. And then you get into sort of these concepts of the federal triangle. This is becoming more and more out in the open now, where you have this federal district within a federal district almost. You have the White House to the Washington Monument, then up back to the Capitol building, with the hypotenuse being Pennsylvania Avenue, forming this Pythagorean triangle. Well, if you know anything about mysticism or even Rosicrucianism, you'll know that the Pythagorean triangle is representative of the sun god Osiris, his virgin wife Isis, and the hypotenuse is their perfected child Horus. Interestingly, in the federal district, and my book is one of the few, if not the only one that talks about this, the hypotenuse that connects the 2 branches of our elective government, the United States Capitol building, which seats the Senate and the House, and the White House, which is, of course, the executive, is called Pennsylvania Avenue. Pennsylvania is the keystone state, and this ties into royal arch symbology, because without a keystone, a royal arch cannot stand. You can't have an archway without a keystone. And I get into the symbology of a keystone, which is a long story, but it's another solar emblem. And if when you get into the federal district of Washington D.C. and its astrological alignments, you will see that this is, basically the new world's city of the sun.
And Robert, one of the main influences or legacies of Freemasonry, and this may surprise a lot of people, but you do go in depth in your book, is the building of the Erie Canal. Tell us about that.
Oh, sure. Well, if you look at the birth of our young nation back in the day, I guess you had, if you were going to rate things as importance, number one would be the creation of your federal district. Number two would probably be the Baltimore Basilica. And then number three would be the Erie Canal. The Erie Canal was built under the aegis of a Royal Arch Mason named DeWitt Clinton. And DeWitt Clinton is penultimately important because he basically becomes the Grand Master of Royal Arch Freemasonry in 1797 when the Royal Arch Grand Chapter is formed in Boston. And the Erie Canal is really, if you know what a canal system is, it's rising and it's rising and sinking waters. And what the Erie Canal does was it connected New York basically to the Great Lakes, to the Mississippi, and ultimately down to the Mississippi Delta. The Erie Canal as rising waters is actually a symbol of the flooding of the Nile. And this is actually referenced, the flooding of the Nile is actually referenced in James Anderson's Constitutions of Freemasonry. And what Anderson says is, and we're dealing with the 1720s. This was right after 1717, the forming of the Grand Lodge in London. Anderson is a Presbyterian minister, and in his legendary Constitutions, he says, well, Masonry, Freemasonry became improved. That's the exact word he uses, or bettered through the measurement of the flooding of the Nile. And what you have with the Erie Canal is the flooding, the symbolic rising and sinking of the waters to get boats out west. What it is emblematic of is the Nile. And if you actually look, this is where it really gets interesting, and it's in my book. If you actually look at when they opened the Erie Canal in 1824, if you actually look at the ball ticket for the Erie Canal ball, it actually features the caduceus of Hermes on it. And of course, Hermes is penultimately important to the Royal Arch, legend and history, if you will, as Hermes is the guy who ultimately penetrates the vault, pronounces the Tetragrammaton correctly, and restores the 7 liberal arts and sciences. The concept of westward movement, of Freemasonry and Royal Arch degree Freemasonry, which involves, which we talked about earlier, the recovery of this lost name of God. This is talked about by a Freemason named Salem Town. That's not a place I'm talking about. That's an actual name, Salem Town. And Town writes a treatise called A System of Speculative Freemasonry. I want to say off the top of my head it's published around 1817, 1819. I can't remember the exact date. But what Town basically is talking about is the symbolic westward expansion of Royal Arch Freemasonry, and Freemasonry in general is basically expansion of this lost name, logos, if you will, into the Western territories, basically proclaiming the United States as this grand Masonic Royal Arch Republic, if you will.
And Robert, going back to what you were talking about, the emails and the Facebook posts and so forth, what are some of the polemics from the more orthodox-minded that make your eyes roll on a good day and bang your head on a bad day?
Well, I've gotten, when it's, for starters, let me just say it's few and far between, and as of late, it's really dying down. I think that of late, more people are becoming more and more aware of this knowledge. I know for a fact that 20 years ago, this knowledge would have kind of not been laughed at, but kind of would have been not taken as legitimately it is now. I think people are more thirsting for this knowledge than they were. But when I get on Facebook, it's 1 out of every 100 people. I've gotten the comments of, Freemasonry is devil worship. You're going to burn in hell. Recant right now, or you're doomed forever. My experience with this is I just delete the comment. I never, ever get into some sort of online debate with these people. That to me is just a big no-no. That's what they're looking for, is to tie up your time with them. And, when it comes along, and of late I haven't had anything, but when I do get it occasionally, I just delete it. I mean, I just delete it and ignore it. You talk about eye rolling. I'll tell you a story. It really wasn't with Facebook. This happened a couple years ago, but it's interesting. And, we talk about it ties into your question about like the reception of this knowledge and banging your head and rolling your eyes. I was downtown Baltimore. I was at one of my local watering holes sitting on a bar stool with a buddy of mine. And we just started talking about Freemasonry, and I got into the conversation of, the Illuminati with him. And this was the historical Illuminati of 1776 of Adam Weishaupt. And it's nothing, scandalous or anything. But as I was talking to him, we were just having a friendly conversation. I could see this one guy sitting about 5 stools away from me. He started rolling his eyes and shaking his head. And, I could just see the skepticism. Well, after about 15 minutes, my friend had to get up and use the men's room, and the guy, interjected and said, "Listen," he said, "this isn't my business." He said, "But why are you filling your buddy with all this nonsense about the Illuminati and you should know better than this?" I said, "Well, wait a minute. What do you mean?" And this was his answer. He said, "Well, everybody knows that the Illuminati is an invention of Dan Brown." I mean, and I just like my, it's like, my jaw. Let me pick my jaw up off the floor. And I said to him, I said, "Sir," I said, you believe whatever you want to believe. I said, "But let me just say this to you." I said, when you leave here tonight and you go home or wherever it is you're going, I said, if you don't want to do it tonight, do it tomorrow. I said, when you get a minute, I said, go onto either Wikipedia or Google. I said, I want you to Google this name. I want you to Google the name of Adam Weishaupt. I said, just take a look at that and tell me what you see. If I ever see you again, whatever, I don't know you from Adam, but just do yourself a favor and take a look at that. It was about a month later, I was back in there and the guy came in and he actually apologized to me. He said, you were right. He said, I did what you said. He said, and, I had no clue about any of this information, so, it was one of those things where, it was like redeemed at last, basically.
Yeah, and it's interesting that even the most orthodox-minded will look at the Bible and say, well, this has different levels. There's allegory, literalism, whatever. But when it comes to Freemason symbolism or stuff, they won't accept the fact that it has many levels as anything in the esoterica.
Well, when you get into the Bible, the whole thing, my take on it is, and I say this in the Royal Arch, I think the whole thing is a solar metaphor. I think, even in the Old Testament, you got Joseph with the 12 brothers, Jesus with the 12 apostles. At Revelation 22:16, Jesus says, "I am the morning star." The morning star is the sun. Okay, this is in the Bible.
Right.
This isn't me talking or just making stuff up. Jesus, says, "I am the morning star." Well, the morning star is the sun, not to be confused with the son of the morning star or Venus. I've maintained in the book the whole thing is just one giant astrological metaphor. Loads of Christian writers. And these are the guys you're never going to hear about. Forget Thomas Aquinas. I'm talking about the 2nd century guys. Guys like Origen, Tertullian, Martyr, or Justin Martyr. Origen says in his writings, he says, when it comes to Christianity, there are 2 doctrines, the esoteric and the exoteric. One is not written down and is for the initiate, and the other is for the, the profane masses who are meant to believe this is real history relating to real people. And within Masonry, as a candidate, you'll just go through and, you'll see the ritual and you'll go through and you won't think anything of it, not knowing that, you're going through this sort of, symbolic solar allegory, which won't be given to you. Unless you sit down, which few Freemasons do, and start reading Albert Pike, Albert Mackey, the Manly Palmer Halls of the world. And, yes, I agree with you. There are multiple levels to this.
And Robert, in keeping in theme with the show, what are some of the Gnostic influences on Freemasonry? You already discussed Hermes Trismegistos. Are there any others? I find it interesting, like Albert Pike talks about a Johannine influence, a Knights Templar. Do you give credence to these, or what are some of the other ones?
Yes, well, when we're talking about what you're talking about is absolutely true. What we're talking about is the 4th Gospel of St. John. This ties in with what is ultimately a heresy called Gnosticism, where it's basically Jesus wasn't a real person, he was a spirit. What Pike is talking about is And this opens up the Gospel of St. John's. It says, Jesus is the Word. Well, what's the Word? What's the name of God? It's this tetragrammaton, and it's logos, and it's symbolic. And the Gnostics, I believe, again, we're going way back. I mean, we're talking pre, Council of Nicaea here in whatever it was, 325. I think they understood that, this story, this Jesus was this New Age Piscean sun god. I think that's what they were ultimately into. Ultimately, this gets corrupted or changed around where, with the council, this is meant to be now legitimate history or real history, if you will. The Gnostic, influence, with regard to Freemasonry, what it is to me and what I say in the Royal Arch, and I think what it was to Pike it's that this secret that these characters in the Bible, what, the Latin would be, your dramatis personae, if you will, is really just an allegory. And you see the Gnostic teachings reflect this, that Jesus is this, mystical, creature, if you will, preaching this, New Age spirituality, if you will. And what I suggest it's this sort of, what you want to call underground, philosophy, if you will, that and Pike mentions it also, that is basically being transferred down through this New Age, through these groups like the Cathars, the Templars, ultimately the Rosicrucians, even the Jesuits talk about this, the Illuminati, which ultimately turns into what you would call modern day Freemasonry, where the rituals are trying to reflect the story, of the dying yet resurrected sun god.
Robert, the topic of the Illuminati is still very popular from both within secret societies and definitely outside of secret societies, especially people trying to sensationalize the Illuminati. Where do you stand with it, and can you tell us your views on it?
Sure. The Illuminati is an interesting phenomenon. People know the Illuminati. What is, penultimately important with them is really their political methodology, which is what you would call Illuminism, which is sort of the transformation of the world into this perfected quasi-Masonic temple, if you will. My take on the Illuminati is a little different than other people's. We know that the founder of the Illuminati was a guy named Adam Weishaupt. He founded it on May the 1st, 1776 in Bavaria. Anyone who knows anything about the pagan mysteries, as it were, will know the importance of that date, May the 1st. That's, of course, Beltane. That's basically the spring equivalent of Halloween. At any rate, Weishaupt founds it as sort of this new, brand new sort of militant-styled Freemasonry that's going to be this social equality, bring about social equality. It's sort of anti-monarchy, anti-Vatican, anti-religion. It grows and becomes very popular, and part of its popularity stems from a guy joining it named Adolf Knigge, or Adolf Knig. He's a German aristocrat. Weishaupt Knigge's a Freemason. He gets Knigge to join the Illuminati, and when Knigge joins, he brings a whole host of German Freemasons with him into the Illuminati. That's when the ranks really swell. This is where things really get a little dicey, is because Knigge, after joining it, shortly thereafter leaves the order, and he writes a treatise about why he left. And he says to the effect of, why I joined this, he says, I'm a Freemason, and I joined this group because I believed, in Weishaupt, I believed in this sort of, democratic, Pythagorean, fire that he was expounding of equality, of leveling the playing field, sort of anti-monarchy, anti-Vatican, anti-religion. He said, I bought into that. He said, I'm leaving it because after being a part of it, I can tell you right now, this is Knigge speaking, he said, I can tell you emphatically that the Illuminati order, this is the Illuminati of Weishaupt, was nothing more than the Jesuits under another name. What's really interesting about this, and when people hear this for the first time, you can almost see their eyes rolling or shrugging their shoulders. You have to remember something. The Illuminati of Weishaupt of Bavaria of 1776 comes onto the scene shortly thereafter, when the Jesuits, or the Society of Jesus, was suppressed by Pope Clement XIV. In 1773, Pope Clement suppresses the Society of Jesus because of their political intrigues, of their, conspiring against European leaders. You have numerous leaders of the Jesuits fascinated by Egyptian mysticism, Egyptian symbology. The Jesuit priest Athanasius Kircher wrote on this extensively, saying that he believed, that there were elements of Christianity that were incorporating the elements of the Egyptian mysteries, of Osiris, Isis, Horus, concepts related to the Holy Trinity, which he believed was a solar icon coming out of Egypt. Pope Clement has had enough by 1773, and he puts the Jesuits all but out of existence. And it's shortly thereafter that you have the Illuminati come on the scene. And it's almost as if the Jesuits have just gone underground and are just using the Illuminati, or at least that title, as a front or cover. Because if you actually look at your history, I mean, the amazing thing is when the Jesuits go out of business in 1773, then boom, a couple years later, you got the Illuminati. Well, the Illuminati sort of disappears around the early, 1800s, 1805, 1810, during the Napoleonic Wars. The Illuminati sort of kind of fades into the background, and then you have the conclusion of the wars of Napoleon. And then what happens? Well, the Jesuits are restored, and the restoration of the Papal States. So, I mean, it was almost like the Jesuits were just going underground for this sort of 10, 15-year period, and then just reemerge again as the Jesuits. Where I believe the Illuminati is very important is you will clearly see their influence, at least politically, on the development of both the United States of America, this sort of, revolutionary zeal, which you see coming out of Philadelphia in 1776. Of course, the American Revolution, the rebellion against Great Britain. Obviously, you'll see it in the French Revolution, probably a little more explicitly. Weishaupt had written a treaty, I can't remember what it's called, but it was basically about Pythagoras and how, the Pythagorean teachings, represented this perfected society. You look at the French Revolution, what's the penultimate symbol of the French Revolution? I mean, it's the guillotine. What's the guillotine? Well, it's a Pythagorean right triangle, which was used to basically get rid of the so-called, quote unquote, enemies of the state. The Illuminati definitely sort of disappears off the history books in the 1800s, in the early 1800s. But what is important is there's sort of political fire, the revolutionary zeal, if you will. It's definitely carried on in other societies. Namely, and this was George Washington talked about this a little bit. He thought it had come into America through the Jacobite societies, the democratic clubs. And the Jacobites, of course, were the real fiery leaders of the French Revolution. The main group that Illuminism goes into during the 19th century in Europe is a group called the Carbonari, or the charcoal burners. That's what that means. They are basically sort of this revolutionary brotherhood that are basically behind the revolutions of 1832 and 1848, and you can attribute that to the influence of the Illuminati.
And Robert, wasn't Weishaupt himself tied with the Jesuits? He was a professor or a teacher?
Yes, absolutely. Carnegie says this in his works. Weishaupt was trained by the Jesuits. Numerous leaders of the Illuminati were trained by the Jesuits. One of the main ones, Weishaupt aside, was a guy named Ignaz von Born. And von Born is the head of the Illuminati temple in Vienna, Austria. And he's important because he's left out of the movie, but von Born is the Illuminati Freemasonic influence on Mozart. And von Born basically inspires Mozart to compose his Masonic Illuminati opera called The Magic Flute. And Ignaz von Born actually serves as the inspiration of the character of Zoroastro in The Magic Flute.
And there are people who say that the Illuminati were basically atheists. Do you see them as atheists or simply just very rabidly anti-religion?
I wouldn't say they were atheists at all. They were basically what you would call militant deists. I wouldn't go so far as to say that they were. I definitely think they were, definitely hinged towards the side of being anti-Rome. But I never saw. My research has led me to believe they were not atheists at all. They were basically what you would call extreme or militant deists, and they just believed in sort of, a supreme being type of character. This carries again into the French Revolution, where you'll see guys like Robespierre putting on, the cult of the supreme being, or, the worship of reason. It was God was reason and knowledge, not some sort of mythical, fantastical creature. God was light, reason, the supreme being. That was my take on them.
And ultimately, Robert, what do you see as the impact of Freemasonry on our modern culture?
Well, I think that, when you look at the United States today, and I think I do very well document this in my book, clearly, we have a lot of the founding, this has been talked about before. You have a lot of the founding fathers were Freemasons. Development of this country, Washington, our first president, was a Mason. Numerous of his generals in his corps during the Revolution were Masons. You got Henry Knox, who was a Mason. He becomes the first Secretary of War. He founds another secret society called the Order of Cincinnati, which is, for lack of a better word, his attempt to form an American aristocracy. Hamilton was involved with this. And when you look at when they're really after the Revolution, this sort of is in the time frame of after 1781 to, let's say, around 1800. These guys are meeting in Philadelphia to create the government. Where do you see Freemasonry in all this? Well, I'm going to tell you. You have the triple division of government, between an executive, judicial, and a legislative branch. This comes straight out of Masonic Lodge, where you have the triple division of government within a Blue Lodge between the worshipful master and the junior and senior wardens. This is, again, another solar icon of the rising sun, the sun at noon, and the setting sun. You have our federal district, which is basically, which we talked about earlier, being this city representing the sun, or solar iconography. Even in the early days of the Republic, you see things like the or when Adams is president. This is after Washington serves his 2 terms and Adams comes in. You have the adoption of the Jay Treaty, where basically the United States throws our French allies under the bus and takes the side of the British. And this was, again, when the French Revolution was in its full fever, as it were. You can definitely successfully argue that the adoption of the Jay Treaty was based on, Freemasonry and the fear of the Illuminati. Adams was very skeptical of the French and the French Revolution. Many people had written, and the main guy is a guy named Jebediah Morse, who basically wrote a treatise in America saying the French Revolution was a bloodbath orchestrated by the Illuminati. Jefferson is sort of pegged in this corner with this group because of his ambassadorship to the French Republic. And in a nutshell, the election of 1800 is decided over this fear of the Illuminati, where Adams is thrown out. Eventually, the Federalists are defeated. Jefferson is elected president. Notwithstanding, the Jay Treaty was still adopted, but Jefferson comes in and takes this very pro-French stance. Of course, this leads to the Louisiana Purchase, and ultimately you have Jefferson and Jeffersonian politics dominating the next 10 years. And then, of course, by that time, England has had enough of this, says, where's our Jay Treaty? And you got Jefferson's disciples like Monroe and Madison, who basically say, well, we're not going along. And that, of course, leads to the War of 1812. There is clear influence with, the influence of Masonry on that time frame in history.
And in your book, you offer a very compelling chapter on Masonic symbols in modern cinema. Could you tell us about it, since film tends to be a powerful conduit or reference and perspective in our modern culture?
Yeah, sure. It's good that we talk about this because it's the final chapter of my book, and I'm real glad you asked me about this, because it actually leads me into my second book, which I'm currently writing. The final chapter deals with Masonic influence and Enochian influence in some movies. And when I was writing that chapter, I had in the back of my head some more, esoteric, dualistic, ideas, or not ideas, topics I wanted to talk about other movies, but I didn't really feel like it fit into the book, into the Royal Arch book. So my second book that I'm writing right now deals with more Masonic, esoteric, concepts relating to dualism, alchemy, mysticism, the occult into modern movies. But in the Royal Arch, the final chapter deals with movies such as, like, for example, the first National Treasure movie. Well, the first National Treasure movie with Nicolas Cage is literally a replication of the Royal Arch degree. It's the recovery of Freemasonry, of the Templars underneath the Holy Ground, which in the movie was Trinity Church in New York. In the ritual, it's the Temple Mount where Solomon's temple once sat, and they're building the second temple of Zerubbabel. You got the concepts of decoding the clues to locate this treasure vault, and it's the same thing in the Masonic ritual. It's the treasure vault of Freemasonry, where this esoteric wisdom is kept, under the holy ground. I get into concepts related to the movie Being There. This was a movie that came out, I want to say, in 78, 79. You've got the guy Rand who is part of this sort of secret cabal at the end, being put into the Masonic / esoteric crypt, which is the back of the $1, which is the truncated pyramid with the eye on top of it. And as he's being placed in the crypt, they're talking about, well, who are we going to select for the next, United States president? And you got the character, the Peter Sellers character of Chauncey Gardner, who is trying to say Chauncey the Gardner, but everyone misinterprets it as Chauncey Gardner. If you listen to what he says in the book, he's just another one of these solar heroes. All he does is drone on and on about this, solstices and equinoxes, about, the sun comes out in, spring and we replant, and then the trees and life die, and we have the vault of winter, and then the sun is born again. It's just another solar hero. I tie this into the movie and to generally the Arthurian legend, and it's again, King Arthur is the sun, Excalibur is, the sun ray, which he pulls from the stone, Christ emerges from the stone when it's rolled away, Arthur has the 12 knights, the 12 houses of the zodiac. It's the same, replication. You got the character of Merlin in the Arthurian legend, the guy who keeps the wisdom. This is the Hermes character. This character is all over the place in modern cinema. Sort of the old hermit with the gray beard who, the hero meets, and this is the character who has all the answers, but is somewhat, reluctant to give them away. It's Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars, Yoda in Empire, Albus Dumbledore in the Harry Potter films. It's Merlin in the Arthurian legend. I tie all that in together. And what's one of the other movies I talk? Oh,
The Ninth Gate.
Oh, The Ninth Gate. Oh my God, that thing is replete with Kabbalistic symbolism. That's one of my all-time favorites. You got the character of Balkan, the book collector who is trying to unlock these 9 gates. The 9 gates are really, the movie ties it in with devil worship, which is basically done for, a lurid, appeal. Devil worship sounds a whole lot more appealing than Hebrew Kabbalah, but it's basically the 9 gates are the 9, Sephiroth, which once unlocked lead to this 10th gate, which you get this divine wisdom. The Balkan character is, which I say in my book is reflective of this, English mystic named Aleister Crowley. You've got the book, the guy who has the book back in the day who's burnt alive, the Torquia, I think his name was. This is reflective of a Dominican friar named Giordano Bruno, who dabbled in this material and was ultimately burned at the stake. You've got the Dalai Melanchthon. This is reflective of this satanic grimoire originally written by the devil. This reflects the H.P. Lovecraft Necronomicon. And you've got the plates in the book, which are very heavy overload with tarot card symbolism, and a lot of the images in those in the book from the movie really look similar to the engravings in the Lutheran Bible. It's just a lot going on in that movie. It's the final part of the book, and and right now I'm currently working on my second book. It's actually titled Cinema Symbolism, and I tie in Kabbalah, tarot cards, mysticism. the occult, Freemasonry, both High and Blue Lodge, to movies like Star Wars, and I'm talking all 6 of them, the Back to the Future movies, the Omen trilogy, The Exorcist, films like Black Swan, which came out a couple years ago. That movie has tons to do with dualism. Same with the James Bond films. And, you know, that book I should have done at the end of the summer, early fall of this year, and I'm looking for probably an early 2014 release date.
Well, we certainly look forward to that book, but I think that's all the time we have today, Robert. I'd like to thank you very much for coming on Aeon Byte and discussing your book, The Royal Arch of Enoch.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and, you know, I enjoyed being here, and thank you very much for your time.
And there you have it, my beloved truth seekers. Robert Sullivan on a sober but enlightening interview on the impact of Freemasonry on modern culture. From his new and exciting book, The Royal Arch of Enoch. You can find more information on Robert at robertwsullivaniv.wordpress.com. Like I keep saying, it doesn't matter if the Archons, lizard people, or Illuminati exist. You have felt their effects in your lives, usually for the worse. Furthermore, the establishment thinks they are more than human, that they are really part of those beings. They have lost their humanity and have become inhuman, crazy machine gods. And we are their slaves, but no more, my beloved truth seekers. And again, check out our archive of past shows for more stuffy stuff on the Freemasons and the other secret societies. From some of the great luminaries of our times on the esoterica. And again, please support Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio in any way you can. And that's about it, my beloved truth seekers. I'd like to end with some music by James Allen Brown, who is a member of Sylvia Bliss, who also has my friend and fellow Gnostikoi, Errol Eisel. And he's also a great musician and a past guest on Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio. James just released his CD, and the song is Interweavings. You can find more information on Sylvia Bliss, James, and Errol at ReverbNation.com. Until we meet again, let us keep fighting the good fight, keeping the faith, and finishing the race. And who are we? Well, we are still rainbows in the dark. We are the adventurers into the nebulas of the subconscious, and the explorers past the uncharted territories of the planets and the stars. We are the myth makers, dark dreamers, and oracles of impossible secrets. We are the veterans of 1,000 psychic wars, and we have set the controls to the heart of the sun. Divided we stand, together we rise. We're writing our own gospel and living our own myth, embracing both the gospel of the drive-through Jesus and the gospel of Bill Hicks. I am Abraxas, broadcasting at the virtual Alexandria through the GodAboveGod.com. The road is ended, the song is over, thought I'd have something more to say. But don't cultivate any troubles, my beloved truth seekers, because like heaven above you, the spy that loved you, I'm keeping all of your secrets safe with me tonight. Hello and goodbye as always.